Tom, thank you so much for joining me on The Record.
Thank you so much for having me, Hadley.
Walk me through what you've accomplished this week in your mind.
I think a lot of people would have come into this week thinking, oh, diplomacy doesn't really matter. It's a more transactional, sort of strongman, survival of the fittest world. And, why do you need these institutions anymore? This week has proved that completely wrong, because there has been an energy in this building, an energy in the conversations, voltage. And that goes from, never mind some of the theatre and the drama and the roller coaster moments that the media may focus on. I know not you, but the media more broadly.
It's hard to dismiss the President of the United States.
Yeah, but the key thing with the President of the United States was actually the bilateral he had with the Secretary General of the UN, where they focused on working together for peace, which was the key message in the President's speech to the GA. And I think that has put energy through the system and as I say, voltage and electricity through the peacemaking efforts. And so as a result of that, I think, here we are moving forward on some of these key dossiers. I think there has been practical progress on Ukraine, and I discussed that with the Foreign Minister yesterday. I think there's been real practical progress on Sudan. I've just come this morning from an excellent meeting with Dr. Boulos on how we get the convoys moving up to Al-Fasher. I talked yesterday to the leader of the RSF. I talked on Wednesday to the Prime Minister of Sudan. Again, practical progress in getting the aid where it's needed and moving towards a ceasefire. And, let's see with the elements that we're hearing about now in the conversation about Gaza, whether there is hope there of a change in that dynamic. So I don't want this week to end. I don't know about you. It's been hard, it's been exhausting, but that's real progress.
When you think about the moves that have to be made to put an end to the war in Gaza, what still needs to be done?
Ceasefire. So get that ceasefire, create the conditions where we can scale up the aid massively, hundreds of trucks a day, unimpeded access, free access to the north and to the south. We could flood Gaza with aid. At the moment we're getting it's a drop in the ocean, what we're allowed to get through, and we're facing horrific conditions on the ground. We all know about the levels of starvation, death, destruction, displacement. So allow us to get in, stabilize the humanitarian situation, and then let's find a way, hard as this is, because there's a lot of mistrust. It's been a terrible 2 years, and I've been touched even overnight with friends I've made in Niroz kibbutz that was hit on October the 7th, and so many of the Palestinians who are suffering so much, including in Gaza City right now, but somehow get back to a conversation about peace and that long-term horizon about how we do move towards, and this idea has been attacked and vilified, but it's still the best idea out there, towards a two-state solution. Israel and Palestine living alongside each other, security, justice, opportunity. That's what civilians across the region want.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has, of course, pushed that as far away as possible by saying he doesn't believe in a two-state solution. What are you hearing from the Israelis?
So I haven't had a chance to catch up on Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech this morning. What I understand he said was he didn't want a terror state. And none of us want a terror state. We want a Palestinian-led.
But he said in the past, no more to the two-state solution.
I think he's made it very, very clear that that's not part of his plan, or certainly not the plan of this current Israeli cabinet. But I think it is the plan of the global international community. No one has come up with a better idea than a two-state solution. We know how complex, we all understand the history, we understand the division and the polarization and the distrust that exists. But unless anyone can show me a better plan, then I think we have to continue doing everything we can to get towards two states living alongside each other.
So we're closer than we were 5 days ago to a ceasefire in Gaza? I
think we are. I say that because I'm always the last person in the room being hopeful and idealistic. But I think we're hearing much more clearly that from the world, enough. This has gone on too long. The damage has been too great. And we have to change the dynamic and get towards a ceasefire. So I desperately hope that we get one.
So we've heard from the Saudis, of course, they've said 90 million for Gaza. This is not the first time they've made big commitments. When you look at the Gulf Arab countries specifically, what more do you want to see from them?
Well, we need that political support on which they've been so consistent. And I've just come from a meeting with my Qatari colleague, and they're working so hard behind the scenes but I know that goes for so many across the region. My next meeting is with the Jordanian foreign minister, who's of course been a tireless advocate for peace. So the politics is important, but we can't neglect the humanitarian side. The needs are enormous, hundreds of thousands. We know there is a famine. We know about the destruction of hospitals and schools and the rebuilding work which will have to be done if we are to give the population of Gaza and of course the West Bank, where we've got real problems too, any hope, any sense that the world is finally responding to what they've gone through. So we do need that funding.
What's the price tag in your mind?
I mean, I think it's going to cost immense amounts. There's a price tag for the humanitarian response, where basically we've got to reach hundreds of thousands with food, with medicine, with shelter, because so much of Gaza has been destroyed. But then, and I can't even estimate the price tag now for rebuilding Gaza in the future, which is a massive project. But unless we do it, then we just continue to store up problems for the future. So we know there's a huge task ahead. We, the humanitarians, we are ready to go as we have been every day. Every day we get up and we look at the conditions we face, which are horrific for our work. We're overstretched, we are under-resourced, we are under attack in Gaza as everywhere else around the world. But we dust ourselves down every morning and we say, let's just try and get that aid through.
In terms of the under-resourcing, what is it that you need today?
So our appeals globally are about 20% funded. And this is probably about half of what we had even this time last year, and that wasn't a great year either. So we need that money to start flowing. We need that sense of generosity. You know, investment in humanitarian work is actually cheap compared to trying to invest in the consequences of conflicts. All I'm asking to save 114 million lives next year is 1% of what the world will spend on arms and defense and conflict next year. And what many countries are boasting about spending on arms and defense and war. 1% of that, 25, 30 billion, and we can save 114 million lives.
Do you think you'll get
Surely
it?
That's worthwhile. I hold out the hope every day that we will get it, because I haven't given up on global compassion. I still feel that when people hear the stories, when they see the photos, when they see the footage of suffering in so many of these crises we deal with, from Gaza, from Sudan to Haiti, Afghanistan, DRC, all these places that I've visited in the last year, when people hear those stories of immense suffering, but also of survival and dignity and hope, that we're moved as humans to respond. And we can do that through governments, and that's important, but there's less funding there than usual. But also we need a movement where individuals themselves are inspired to that generosity.
We've seen a great deal of excitement surrounding the visit to the United Nations of the new president of Syria. You know the Middle East better than anybody. Are you feeling optimistic about the future of Syria today?
I am. And this week has made me more optimistic. I met the president 2 days ago, and I have a meeting with the Foreign Minister, Shabani, later this afternoon with UN colleagues. When I look around the region for hope, I see the trajectory of Syria over the last year. And, you know, I've worked on Syria for many years, including from Beirut during some very dark times. And there's a long way to go. And of course, we will hold the Syrian authorities to account for what they say, the promises they're making on it being a genuinely inclusive government, on people from wherever they come from in Syria, whatever background, and including all those returnees that we know will go back to Syria, that they feel safe and part of the future. And I'd really include in that women and girls who are not just part of the future, they've got to be leading that future, because Syria needs their expertise and their brilliance and their creativity as part of that recovery. But Syria's come a long way, and it's unimaginable from a year ago, and we've got to build on that progress. You know, I said to the Security Council last week, in Syria, I want to put myself out of business. You know, I don't want the humanitarians to be in Syria in a year's time. We will be there as long as it takes, but we should surge that humanitarian work, get the food, the shelter, the hospitals up and running, clear the mines, which are stopping many people go home, try and get the water and the power back on, and then hand over to the development actors and to the Syrian people, because they themselves are telling us that they shouldn't be dependent on humanitarian support.
So you're optimistic about Syria. How are you feeling today about Lebanon?
You know, Lebanon's in a way, my blind spot, isn't it? Because I'm always over-optimistic about Lebanon. When I was ambassador, I was always talking about Lebanon 2020, just imagine what it can be. And, you know, this utopian vision, which I really do believe in. Now maybe I'm talking about Lebanon 2030. So, you know, events keep proving me wrong, but I promise to be the last person in the room who gives up on Lebanon. And sometimes the Lebanese population themselves despair, you know, with good reason, because they are battered again and again, and the external interference that we all know about, the bombardment of the south, which we've been seeing, and I visited Lebanon in December and saw that again myself. But what a people and what a place. And if anyone can bounce back, it can be Lebanon. And we've got to be at Lebanon's side. For me, it's always about ending that external interference and creating the conditions where Lebanese people can run Lebanese affairs. And when that happens, watch Lebanon go. It'll be amazing.
We've seen the United States repeatedly tell them, you know, you've got to get the arms, getting behind the Lebanese armed forces, getting the arms from Hezbollah. Do you think that that's possible?
I think we're seeing it already. We're seeing that transition towards a much clearer civilian-led state with civilians in control of the arms in the country. It was something I worked on a lot when I was there. You know, this time 12 years ago, we were starting to build those watchtowers along the border between Lebanon and Syria. I say we now in the sense of Britain rather than the UN. My old hat on. And they were essential for building up the authority of the Lebanese armed forces in the state of Lebanon. And I think you've seen a continuation of that trend, and it's an important trend. And of course, now with my UN hat on, we want to see that stability throughout the country. We want to see a genuinely inclusive, effective government, and we want to see protection for Lebanese civilians throughout the country, and that space for Lebanon itself to lead its own future.
What do you make of the idea of a southern economic zone?
I haven't seen the detail of how that would work in practice.
I don't think any of us have.
I think, you know, Lebanon isn't a huge country, and I've always felt that that sense of unity and togetherness is essential. I've always worried about formula that divide Lebanon further. It's much stronger united.
Tell me about the Syrian refugees in Lebanon. Do you anticipate they're going to go back home to Syria?
So I was with my great friend and colleague Filippo Grandi the other day. He's the High Commissioner for Refugees, and they've done some really interesting polling that shows, you know, that a large number of Syrian refugees in Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey are very keen to go back. I think 900,000 went back in, you know, this year so far. But what we're trying to do is understand what are the conditions that you need in place for them to be confident that they can go back. And some of those are practical things like clearing the mines, schools opening.
Basic services.
Yeah, basic services. People want to know their kids can go to a school, get a decent education. And some of it is about the politics and about people feeling safe and that their rights will be secured no matter what their background, where they come from, in this new Syria. And I think we're making progress on all of those factors, and that can help to make Syria magnetic again, which is important for the countries of the region too.
In your mind, when you look at Europe as a whole today, there are so many questions about migration. There's a rise in far-right parties, whether we're talking about Germany or even in the United Kingdom itself. In your mind, is this a problem that is going to go away?
We have to all imagine that we might be migrants, that we might be refugees. I don't think we should demonize people on the move. Yeah. I think we should understand the drivers. Of course, we need to manage the diplomacy around the impact of migration and the movement of people. We shouldn't just dismiss the concerns that people have, especially when you have large numbers arriving. You've seen that in Lebanon, the pressure it puts on the resources of the state. I think we should understand that.
It's happening everywhere. It's happening in the United Kingdom and France.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely right. And I think many of the peace processes of the future won't just be working on Israel-Palestine or on Sudan and these other great conflicts that the President of the US and others are talking about trying to end. I think there'll be great peace processes inside communities, between migrants and host communities, for example, between generations, and then peace with the past. How do we heal the wounds of history and peace with the future. How do we hand on to future generations the right skills, the right education, the right empathy and emotional intelligence to be able to coexist in these changing times?
Tell me this, the President of the United States has said he will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. Do you think that he's got that kind of clout?
President Trump has a lot of clout. He's the President of the United States. He's someone who's shown that he will pick up the phone, work the phones, use the muscle, use the persuasion of the US to get stuff done. And we're seeing positive results of that, as I say, on Sudan at the moment, on the DRC, on several of these big, long-running crises.
So you believe him?
So I'm so keen to see it happen. I desperately want to see that movement to a two-state solution, desperately want to see the end of forced displacement and annexation in the West Bank. So let's get behind anything that increases the chances of peace for Israelis and for Palestinians and for the region.
And final question. If you had a shopping list, what is it that you need today?
So in all of these crises, I need three things. I need peace, the guns to fall silent, because ultimately without ceasefires, it's much, much harder for us to get our support through. As my great friend, the head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, says, peace is the best medicine. Then I need access, particularly access across lines, across the fighting lines. And my colleagues, we run the risks. We're willing to go and hit the checkpoints, knowing the dangers that we face, but we need to be protected when we do that. We need to know that the agreements can be put in place that allow us to access, we shouldn't have to ask, but that allow us to access the people who need our help. And then I need money. As I say, we're 20% funded across our appeals. Many of the appeals only 10 or 11% funded. I mean, this is a massive funding crisis. And I and my colleagues, every day, we're making horrific, brutal, literally life and death decisions about which project to fund, which project not to fund. I was heartbroken coming out of DRC, also coming out of Haiti a couple of weeks ago, wondering whether people I'd met would die because of the cuts, the decisions I'm having to make on funding cuts. And I'm not prepared to accept that. I'm not prepared to accept that the world's become less generous, less compassionate. We've got to find a way to be kind and to recognize our common humanity.
Do you think you can convince President Trump to do that?
Yes.
Tom, it's great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us on The Record.
Thank you. Thank you, Hadley.